So I'm Amy, and I just finished my BA in Interior and Spatial Design, and my third year was pretty much about decolonization of the curriculum and also spatial experiences, I guess, of like the built environment and how to make our built environment more like representative and diversive of everyone. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. What about you?
So I graduated from the same course a few years back and took a more unconventional route. And I decided I wanted to do my master's in architectural history, but I didn't want to rush into it. So I took a lot of time deciding, like thinking what I wanted to get out of my master's. And I did a few bits of bobs within the heritage sector with some organizations. But now I'm finally doing my master's, and alongside that, I'm also part of a collective called After Party.
Cool. Okay. I looked at the website and everything. It looks really cool. I was wondering, like, how did you get into that? Like, how did you join, and like, you know, how did you start with the collectives?
So in one of my gap years before starting my master's, the new architectural writers program launched, and so that's a program for Black and ethnic minority emerging writers, and it was a program designed to kind of disrupt the monoculture that dominates architectural criticism. So that's had a tremendous positive influence on my practice. So a lot of the skills that I learned through those workshops, I'm now using in my academic writing. But it's also through that program that we launched After Party. And so there's 9 of us. This is our first zine. And this is the 9 of us in the center. Yeah. So first cohort of that program. And towards the end of the program, we had a live event. We titled it for The Time for Failure Is Now. And we interviewed the panelists about around the theme of failure within the built environment. And then that conversation was transcribed, and we picked quotes from the transcript and launched off that and wrote articles. So this is mine, and I picked this quote about social mobility by Dana Walker. And I mean, there's a lot of discussion alongside decolonizing the curriculum and with in terms of the attainment gap. But a lot of that conversation is usually discussed at a higher education, but the gap is present from like the age of 5. So during my gap year, I worked in education. So I used my experiences in all these various different schools to look at how the educational setting itself, the design of the school, fails children. So yeah, that's how I kind of got into it.
Cool. Okay. I wanted to ask you, I didn't know that you did the same course. What was your experience like at the course? Like, what did you do your projects on, I guess?
I really enjoyed my time there, but like I don't think I was such a great designer. I was more of a researcher. So for second and third year, I picked the Design Research Studio 6 that was led by Robin and Deborah. The theme around that the slogan of it was Design to Survive. So we'd pick a disaster and design around that. And I'd pick a lot of these abstract disasters, and I'd spend a lot of time researching about it, and then later on designing. But how about yourself? What have you been doing?
I mean, should we talk about like our final year or like the whole thing? I mean, my final year, I took DRS 5, which was about this like cinema and film and expanded cinema. So like creating film experiences for people at the South Bank. And it was good because like the BFI is also at the South Bank and like the National Theatre. So it's very much like a cultural hub. So I was like, it's sort of like the perfect place to create a cultural film experience, I guess. At first, I didn't really know like what my project was going to look like, but as I kind of got more like inspired in my own personal life, I realized what my goal was, and that was to create a space where film wasn't so westernized. It was more like looking at film from the African diaspora, for example, because we don't really see that in mainstream cinema or like film. So yeah, I found out a lot about various like filmmakers I hadn't heard about before, and yeah, it was cool.
In terms of like designing around the South Bank, how was your experience of the South Bank? How did that influence the way you designed around the space?
Okay, so basically when I first started it, I was initially thinking of just like one section to place whatever design I was going to make. But I realized like there's so much to do at the South Bank. So I kind of decided to make a series of installations, I guess. So it ended up being 3 different, what would I call them? I guess there was like a folly, that's like a cinema, and then there was like a middle point, which was kind of like an exhibition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of just built around the existing space, like the way that the site was built already. I kind of just slotted my things in the existing site. Yeah, I was happy with it in the end. So I didn't know like it would actually turn out the way it did, but it was all right. Yeah.
And how was it like writing your dissertation? What was your experiences with that?
I mean, I love writing anyway. I love essays. That's always been my strength, I guess. But it was still like quite challenging because it's a dissertation. It's not just an essay, it's a dissertation. So it was a lot. It was like, how many? I think it was about 60 or 70 pages in the end. And I picked a topic that was so complex because we're talking about race in architecture, and there's also disparities with gender as well, and like so many different aspects that you need to consider. Mm-hmm. So I just tried to touch on everything as best I could, and I kind of like talked about how I guess architecture is seen as it's very male, it's very white, it's very like European, but it's actually not European. But the architecture that we've been taught and that we see is all European. So like I felt that it was important to have a bit more of a representation for people who actually like want to study architecture but want to see themselves in the industry. Because like if you don't see yourself represented, you're not really going to feel that encouraged. It's harder to feel like you're actually going to fit into like an office or a firm, you know. So yeah.
What I found quite interesting when reading yours is that you decided to critique the actual education that you're undertaking.
Yeah.
How was that? Because you looked at you're looking at the course module. You weren't looking at something external. You're looking at what you're currently doing. So how was that?
I felt like, I don't know, like not bad, but kind of like it hadn't really been done. I hadn't read a dissertation where somebody had critiqued their current course. So I didn't think about it like this is going to be kind of controversial or whatever. I just sort of like, I just did it. I just said what I felt, and I wanted to see more women. I wanted to see more women of color, and I don't know. I wanted to like see, envision a future of architecture, but also a future of what the education of spatial design could be. Yeah, I felt like in our lecture series or like anything that we were doing, I was always learning about like a European man, which is fine, but it's not at the same time. It's a bit limiting, and there's so many different cultures that we could learn about, and you know, and I feel like that you can only benefit from learning about various cultures. It's not gonna put you back in any way. It's actually gonna make your work better because you can implement different styles. So yeah. I guess.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I feel as if I have a lot of unlearning that I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
When I write essays now, I look at my references, and a lot of it is still white male. Even if the topics vary, diverse, my references aren't. So I have a lot to do in terms of like learning about different cultures and reading the works of non-Europeans. That's something I definitely need to do. I think it's an ongoing struggle.
Yeah, and like when I was writing it, I was learning as I was writing. Like I was researching for the topic that I was about to write about. So I didn't really know much about like Mesopotamian cultures and like architectural planning, but like I had to show that this is what was relevant. So like I had to learn it myself because nobody else was going to teach me about that, you know? Yeah. But it was good though. It was a good experience. Yeah. So what would you say were your highs and your lows of your course? Yeah. Or like what are you remembering?
So I'd say my my strengths were definitely writing as well. So I guess like the most enjoyable experience was writing my precedent report. It took me ages to kind of decide what I wanted to write about, and I spent far too long writing my dissertation. But when I did finally start writing my precedent report, it was the most, and I think to this day it's still the most enjoyable academic experience. So I chose to look at one of my favorite novels, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Okay. I picked a space within the novel and then looked at different ways it's been visualized in media, in film, TV, and theatre. But yeah, that was the most enjoyable, I guess, because I was writing from a place, something that I was very interested in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what has your most memorable experience been during your undergraduate degree?
I think it was just the final year because I had a lot more freedom, and I felt like that freedom brought more inspiration creatively. I think like when you're in your first and second year, it's about getting used to the speed of things, and you can kind of end up drowning in all the stuff, but as it's going on, you can, and by the end of it, I felt a lot more comfortable, and yeah, I guess that's why it was a bit more memorable. And actually, like, talk about my work in a clear sense of what, like, I know what I'm actually producing, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. What do you hope to do now that you've graduated?
I want to expand my portfolio so that I actually have a body of work to show a firm or like a collective or a studio that I actually really like. So if I find a group or something that I want to get involved in, and I'm actually like, okay, this is something that I could see myself in, then I'm gonna be ready to like put myself out there. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'd have to like continue my work and also I guess just networking and stuff, right? Like all that stuff. Yeah.
Have you heard of Black female architects?
Yes.
Yeah. Doing that, it's not just for architects, but anyone else that's within the field of the built environment. Mm-hmm. That's a great place to start with terms of like networking. Mm-hmm. You hope to continue on to a master's?
This is what I was thinking, actually. I was actually thinking about this yesterday, if I should do a master's or not. I don't know. Like, I think I should ask you, what are the pros and cons, I guess, of a master's?
I'd say a master's is worth it if you know what you want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And it's much more intense than an undergraduate. And I think it's like I'm doing mine part-time, and I'm really grateful for that because mm-hmm. It gives me more, it gives me opportunity to really kind of grow and develop my thinking and my writing, which I wouldn't have had the opportunity if I did it all in 1 year and if I did it straight after my undergraduate. So I think when it comes to deciding what you want to do for a master's, or if you want to do a master's, take as much time as you need to think about it. And when you do decide to do it, and if you do, made me think of doing it also part-time, because it gives you even more time to really develop, because it is quite intense. It's way more intense than an undergraduate.
Yeah. Okay. Did you do your master's in the same subject, or did you like kind of switch the course, I guess?
So I did it in, I'm doing it now in architectural history at Bartlett. So I guess it's very similar to the history and theory components that we do at Chelsea, but it's much more in depth and much more challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine. Bartlett is really good though, so well done on that.
Thank you, but it's a very intense place to be in.
Okay, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
If I compare the two, Chelsea's a very small, quaint, and it's a very comfortable place to be in. While Bartlett is one building within like a huge complex, and there are pros and cons to being in a big university as to a smaller space like Chelsea.
It's quite intimidating, I can imagine.
Yeah, and I think also Chelsea's much more intimate. It's much, you get to know people more, I think, because it's much smaller.
Okay.
How's online learning going for you?
Actually fine. Like this whole quarantine's been really, really fine. Like after a month or so, but it was quite comfortable. Yeah. It's weird at the end because we're graduates. That's the thing that's weird.
Yeah.
To align with, because you don't really feel like there's a lot of closure. You know, it doesn't feel like, I feel like I'm a bit like in limbo. Like, what do I do now? Like, but what can you do? Just gotta move.
I was hoping, Shukri, you'd tell about your Tate Exchange project, but I think it's quite a nice project.
In 2017, Shukris, you organised Tate Exchange, and they had an open market at the end of the exchange that I signed up to with a few friends of them. And so we're all from a Somali background, and one of the conversations that we have is around nomadic architecture. So in Somali culture, in nomadic Somali culture, it's the women's role to build a house, to build the portable structure. We found that quite interesting. It was because it wasn't just Somali culture; it was in pretty much every single nomadic culture. The job of building the home is the women's role. But at that time, when I was looking at the statistics, I think it was only 17% of architects in Britain are women. So we were like discussing that as to why is it within certain societies, building is only within the female domain, but within the Western context, within city architecture, it's heavily dominated by men. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.